This is not just the Dyslexia Questionnaire. This is more like an assessment where I can sit, or imagine I'm sitting opposite you, and not only am I reading you the question, but I'm explaining a little bit more about it, and you have to just click the answer that applies best to you. So the answers are either never, rarely, sometimes, often, or always. And at the end, the result will come back to you. First question. Reading is a challenge and comprehension difficult without reading a page several times. As this test is mainly for adults, this applies for an adult dyslexic who has usually got quite a stable reading level, but they need to read everything 3, 4, 5 times to understand or comprehend what the text is about, especially if it's not a topic that interests them highly. Next question. Spelling is often guesswork, or I spell as I hear it. Very common. Creative people are dyslexic. Visual, creative, big picture thinkers are treating words often the same way as their creative mind. They guess, and they spell it as they hear it. Next question. Great ideas in my head, but they don't come across equally good when writing. That's actually a good thing. The creative ideas are huge, and they're much easier to express in words than to write them down, because it requires a more linear way of thinking, a more left brain approach to write them down, while in the brain, in that visual way, it is in the right side of the brain. So it doesn't always make sense when it comes down on paper. Next question. The writing goes off on a tangent, is led by an overactive creative mind. Same thing. When writing and the mind comes in with this angle and that angle, it is very easy to get lost on another track and going off subject when you write an essay or a story. Next question. Intelligent, high IQ or average IQ, but poor performance under stress. The poor performance could be generally, but under stress or under time pressure, it is extremely hard to achieve that or show that level of intelligence in an academic output or at work. Next question. Difficulty to focus on a task and less highly interested. Yes, that comes back to a lack of staying with one task and being able to rein in the mind that it has one spot, that it is not distracted and not going off in different directions, that concentration can remain on the page that is read or written. Next question. At school, were you falsely labeled as lazy, careless, or someone who doesn't try hard enough? It may not be falsely, because it could have been that initial enthusiasm for going at school was squashed quite quickly by an inability to understand and to perform at the same level as your classmates. And I hear that all the time. She's not stupid. They understand that you have the intelligence and they can do it. But one day they can, the next day not. That is a real symbol of dyslexia. It's not a reason that they are just lazy or careless. There is a much deeper underlying reason there. Next question. Testing better orally than in written form. Yes, most dyslexics are quite good orators. They often have fantastic ideas that they have or perform in fantastic speeches, but writing down is much harder. Next question. Lacking self-esteem or the confidence to follow the dream career. It could be at school. Is there enough confidence to show your true colors? And later at work, do you have the confidence to open your own business? Do you have the confidence to ask for promotion or to really realize your talents and your potential in your workforce or in your career? Next question. Working at a job that hides literacy difficulties or is not requiring much reading or writing. That's quite common in adults, that they find a job where someone else does the reading and writing, and they're not required, or they are even sabotaging their careers by not wanting to go to courses or to establish or gain higher qualifications, because that would require them to read, and that would require a lot of effort. Is that you? Next question. Being at a leadership position that requires a secretary to write and organize. Many leaders are dyslexic. It is one of their strengths. Leaders are big picture people. They have a vision, and dyslexics are big picture thinkers with great ideas and great visions, and having a secretary is just another plus where they can avoid that writing and reading and getting a lawyer to read the contract. Next question. Getting frustrated easily with others who think very slowly or think more slowly or more analytical. It always makes me think of the social network, where this frustration can be seen in not being able to understand why people take so long to understand something that it took a dyslexic person 2 minutes, and they're still analyzing and thinking about it, where that dyslexic person has already come up with the solution, which is usually right. Is that you? Next question. Getting anxious or frustrated in new situations. Yes, nobody likes new things, but being under pressure by having to perform tasks that may be around literacy is even more anxious or more frustrating for the person. Next question. Feeling overwhelmed by new or unexpected tasks, or any tasks that involve literacy. That is very similar. It is very, very overwhelming and stressful. And of course, it usually gets avoided, if possible. Next question. Rather watch the YouTube version than read instructions? Who doesn't? Especially if the instructions are something that is not of interest and has to be performed several times, while YouTube makes it much easier. Next question. Reads people well, has an intuitive knowledge. There is a component in not all, but some dyslexic people who have got almost like a sixth sense. They're really good in reading between the lines, or reading people, or making intuitive choices. Next question. Making choices intuitively, instinctively, same thing. Not by analytical pros and cons, but just gut feeling. Much more accurate. Next question. Good problem solving without reading instructions. Practical and hands-on. Now this shows up a little bit more that tactile or kinesthetic dyslexic, who is not so much in a visual but in a hands-on way of solving their problems, of coming up with solutions that they wouldn't have even reached if they had to read the instructions. How to take that phone apart and fix something. They would have done it without instructions. They would have done it just intuitively, fiddling around and being able to fix something that someone else would have had great trouble and take much, much longer. Next question. Avoiding tests or having difficulty passing, especially under time pressure. Yes, as we said before, time is an issue, and especially if you have to read things several times naturally, you will have a much harder time finishing in that right frame of time or passing. Next question. Thinking out of the box and coming up with creative solutions. Fantastic gift, and one that is valued more and more in nowadays. It's those engineers who come up with solutions without having to analytically or to strategically plan it. It's a creative solution that almost comes out of from a different mindset, from a more creative right brain mindset. Next question. Preferring visual, tactile or hands-on professions. Yes, here are all these professions that are visual, like photographers and artists and architects and engineers and tactile, hands-on mechanics, sports people and sports professionals. All these professions have not just an advantage. It's not that you achieve the really highly in certain professions despite your dyslexia, but because of it, because of those talents, of the big picture, the visual leader, the visual CEO of a company. It is because of their intuitive solution finding. Lots of interesting professions where they're not just good at, they are excellent at. Next question, over or underachiever, just not fitting the norm. Sure, a lot of people can relate to that. Fitting the norm is not an interesting thing to be anyway, but underachieving is often a lack of confidence, not even exposing yourself. Overachieving is often a way of trying to prove I am not stupid, I can do that, and I'm going to show you. So that could be you. Next question, being blamed for poor recall of conversations. Yes, I hear that sometimes from spouses. He tells me he hasn't heard that, or he says I haven't explained it, but maybe he just switched off, was daydreaming, and you get blamed for that quite a bit. And it is not deliberate. It is really just the mind wandering off. Usually, unfortunately, not something that is easy to recall back to the body. The next question, getting easily distracted, stressed, overwhelmed, or frustrated. Yes, naturally, there is a very low threshold for frustration because there is a high content of disorientation, and there is a really strong, stressful situation in school and at work as well. Next question. Appears to zone out, daydream, or switch off during conversations or generally at school. They are the daydreamers. They are in their own little world and they cannot recall all the conversations and they don't think it's interesting either. Next question. Avoids reading out loud. Yes, of course. It always has an audience, unless if you don't have an audience, you wouldn't read out loud. And with an audience, it is embarrassing and it is not a good thing to be asked at school. It is a cause for a lot of trauma later in life if teachers force students to read loud. Next question. Have excellent memory for some incidents, but can hardly recall other events. Also, there are events where the mind isn't even present. It's hard to remember things when all you hear in class is blah, 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 blah. And some memories, however, especially of events that are pleasurable, are extremely detailed. Next question. Rely on others to do the bookwork, emails, or what they call boring stuff. Is that you? Do you have a wife or a husband who does the boring things so that you can create and be out there and do the fun stuff? Next question. Hard to get or stay organized and orderly. Creative minds often find it really hard to do the tedious organizing and to have their environment in order, to have their social calendar in order, to have their schoolwork in order. Difficult. Next question. Excellent at sport or artistically talented? These are two outlets where dyslexic people often shine. And it is a part of it is to get out of schoolwork and be excellent at something, but there is more to that. There is also a real gift around being able to see a whole sports field, like a soccer game from a different angle, from a visual big picture, and being able to know where the ball is going to be next. So they are excellent in cricket or in rugby, in places where they have they're predisposed already to be visual and creative and intuitively at the right spot, or they have the creative artistic outlet where they come up with just unusual, beautiful solutions in any artistic field, be it drama, like most actors and actresses, or many are dyslexic, or be it painters and sculptors, screenwriters. A lot of writers are dyslexic. Next question. Having a good sense of humor and socially very competent. Yes, they are. That's also one of the outlets, being a class clown and developing even more of that sense of humor, being visual, coming up with really interesting angles in conversations and being very much liked by friends and peers. Next question. Punctuation marks and grammar challenging. Yes, punctuation marks are usually put by intuition and are not always right, and grammar is just something that's not interesting, not seen as an important part, and it probably should be. The next question. Easily lose track of time. Yes, there is time generally, telling time, knowing how much time has passed, being able to estimate how long a task will take is all very difficult. Even at school, being able to tell the time when you start is a challenge, telling time. Remembering people's faces, but having trouble with their names is the next question. Visual, yes, I can see the face. I even could recall the stories they told me in the past. But if you ask me the name, it is challenging. Last question on dyslexia is poor memory, especially if not interested, and the problems with accurate recall. There's often fantasy coming in, and it becomes a different story when it gets retold. Now the second section is going into the ADD, ADHD field, the attention deficit disorder with or without hyperactivity. So the H is for hyperactivity, and questions incorporate both. This may not be dyslexia. It could be, but it is not necessarily. I will tell you at each question what are the indicators. First question, great difficulty to remain focused on one task at a time. Similar to dyslexia, but here there is another level of disorientation, that focus is even harder to stay for a longer time. And there is a different reason for losing the focus. In dyslexia, you lose the focus because there is confusion. There's a word that a visual learner does not understand. There is no comprehension around words that haven't got a picture, like words like the, on, off. With the attention deficit disorder, the focus or the losing of the focus has a different reason. There is just too much stimuli everywhere in the environment. It could be in every sense. There could be too much light, there could be too much noise, there is a great world outside. So that's leading to the next question. The attention is everywhere. They're hyper alert, picking up stimuli in the environment. This is not necessarily the case with dyslexia. They are less distracted, especially not by everything in the environment. Next question. Literacy skills are mainly affected by an inability to pay attention long enough, different from dyslexia. There is a different reason for losing the focus, different reason for the literacy skills to be poor. Next question. Difficulty reining the mind in and be present. Yes, similar to dyslexia. Probably even harder to rein the mind in. Even harder to be sitting still or meditating if you are hyperactive, and you should be sitting there and not thinking of your breath going in and out. Extremely hard. Next question. Easily bored and frustrated? Yes. Mind is so fast, everybody else is slow, so boring. Next question. Easily disoriented? Daydreaming, wandering mind. Similar to dyslexia. The orientation means that they are perceiving what is out there. They're perceiving what is red in the same way as what is there. They're perceiving the same environmental stimuli than anyone else. Disorientation is not the same. We are not oriented to the same thing, and what we hear is different, what we see is different, and we make up the rest. So it's easy to be not oriented, to be not switched on to the same as the rest of the normal, so-called normal people. So easily distracted, easily wandering off into a different dream world, into another world. Next question. Can be highly concentrated and engaged if interested. There's a whole lot of hyperactive people who can sit for an hour or longer in front of a computer game and not lose focus, be highly concentrated. Next question. Getting into trouble for distracting others and or being distracted. Very common. It's boring to be the only one who is not paying attention, so it is easier to distract others with humor or with being annoying. Sometimes it's just teachers are complaining they're just hard to pay attention. They don't pay attention and they stop others from paying attention. Next question. Fantasy and reality can become blurred. Sometimes they're accused of lying. Sometimes they would lie, yes, like everybody else, knowing they do so. But in ADD or ADHD, there is still another element. They really do not know where the lines are blurred because their visual mind, their creativity, their fast mind is so real that it's hard to know, is it truth or is it a lie? So they're often unfairly accused of lying. Next question. Overwhelmed, overstimulated, very fast mind. Yes, it is hard because there's just so much. There is this information overload and the stimuli from the environment and from every sense, from all of our 5 or 6 senses with too much. Next question. Lots of energy, then crashing. During the day, like a puppy running, and then in the evening, just completely out, crashing, sleeping for 10, 12 hours. Next question. Finding concepts like change, consequence, or sequence difficult to understand. They are concepts of the third dimension that are really depending on a much slower way of processing than their mind does. If you have a visual mind that is out there everywhere, there is not enough time to see the change. There's not enough time to see a before and an after. Something that is causing something is the result is the consequence of an action. And here they get into trouble for having that. They're finding it much harder to fit in that way. Next question. Time issues. Hard to estimate time. Being on time or telling time. Yes, that's a big issue. Next question. Lack of order and organization skills. Yes, chaos reigns and it's hard to organize. Again, very left brain activity, and they're living on the right side of the brain where there is more chaos and visual and in creativity, intuition. Next question. Often getting into trouble and not understanding why. Similar to consequence. They get into trouble. I'm always into trouble. Everybody picks on me. Why? It's just not fair. Hear that all the time. Next question. Academic output does not reflect the high intelligence and the fast mind. Yes, hard to show. It's hard to show and it's hard to understand everything in that short, brief moment. It is really hard to process everything, and the academic output is not really a good reflection of the potential. That's next question. Achieves highly at sport. Yes, as we said, good speed is always good at sport, and having the dyslexic big picture really, really helps. Next question. Difficulty sitting still. Can feel nauseous when forced to at school. Often kids feel actually nauseous if they're not allowed to move a leg or even click a pen to move one part of the body. They could feel like they're sick. Next question or last question in that ADD, ADHD part. Underachievement and poor social skills, despite intelligence and quality parenting. That means the the social skills are not intrinsically poor. They are really that really quick mind and that quick action is really sometimes hard to fit in with the energy level of the rest of the class. You may have kids playing cards, and here this hyperactive child comes in, disrupts, and is not matching the energy with that of the peer group. And they often find themselves outside of circles, not being included. But they have every ability to, and all the intelligence in the world, to do whatever anybody else does. The next section is one I would not recommend you do unless you feel there is something else. There is some kind of level of clumsiness or lack of coordination, lack of balance. And it's dyspraxia. And it's a very interesting part. And if you find from the first question already or the second, this is something you or your child could fit in, yes, but otherwise it's not necessary. Feeling dizzy or disoriented when reading or writing. Text may become blurry or appear different on one side of the page. There is this midline disorientation. There is this feeling of not quite oriented to reality, not quite being in the body in the right way. So here it's a different reason why reading and writing is difficult. In dyslexia, it was a lack of comprehension of words that don't have meaning. In ADD, it was a lack of focus because the mind is everywhere. Here it is different. Here it is this clumsiness as almost being distortedly in the body, of having the mind not in the right orientation. The mind is not in the right place for reading to make sense. So what they see is definitely not what you see. So if you're drawing a couple of lines and they're copying them and it's totally different, then they're actually seeing it in that way, not doing it deliberately. So next question, difficulty making straight lines, circles or diagonal lines. Here you could, or I try to make coils like snakes, pencil thick clay or plasticine rolls, and will ask a child or anyone to actually make the letter W. So I will give them a picture of a W exactly as they can copy. And if you see that the W looks very similar to that picture, it is a good sign. Very often it doesn't. Very often it is crossing over, or even one part of the W is a mirror image below rather than next to it. So you can see any kind of challenge here already in these shapes. Next question. Appears clumsy or accident prone. Yes, there's kids who stumble into chairs and desks and get hurt more so than others. Next question, difficulty walking up or downstairs without holding on to the railing. Again, you see stairs as straight lines, or we all see stairs as straight lines unless you're dyspraxic. Not seeing straight lines, but being almost like a wavy line. You need to hold on to the railing to feel secure. Otherwise, you don't know if you are stepping on the stair or you are in space. Next question. Problem balancing, like standing on one leg while catching a ball. This is easy to check. If you can stand on one leg without a problem, and then you add a ball that you catch and throw, that's already a good sign if that's easy to do. And that should be easy to do a few times, not just once. Next question. Difficulty with sport, especially where balance is required. So any sport like skateboarding or skiing or anything that requires coordination, balance and movement is difficult. Next question, appears to live in another world. Yes, naturally, everybody would recoil into their own world with difficulties at that level. And they are often getting worse with diet, with being addicted to sugar or any other brain poison, because the gut and the brain are inflamed. And this is a part I didn't even write down, but that should be also looked into. Vision is the next question, and there's no problem with the eyes, but there's a problem with the vision. So it's really not the physical eyes, but it's the mind's eye. And if the vision is not the same as ours, it will be quite apparent when you read, and when the reading is blurry or swirly, or often just disappears. Or the page you look at looks like there are rivers running through it, and that's the spaces between the words. Speech may be muddled, body movement too, yeah, but some part of dyspraxia is affecting speech, some is affecting body, and sometimes both. Next question, good hearing, but not listening or comprehending. So hearing test wouldn't show up as any problem, often very, very good hearing, but there is not enough comprehension or enough presence there. So being in another world doesn't help there. Next question, poor short-term memory or memory in general. Hard to recall, remembering one day, the next day it's all gone. Next question, difficulty learning to tie shoelaces. Yes, another crossing over midline and balance and movement. Difficulty holding a pen, handwriting or performing manual tasks. Yes, it's tricky, all these fine motor skills, and the handwriting often going in waves, not in a line, and in differing sizes and shapes, really challenged by handwriting. Next question, easily tired and frustrated? Yes, naturally. Next question, may experience left-right confusion? Yes. When is left, where is right? It's that direction, especially spatial awareness is quite challenged. Our last question in that segment is poor sense of direction and coordination. All similar to the other ones. Yes, not knowing where and what in a space things belong to. There is a disorientation around space and movement, coordination, direction, and in general, poor sense of orientation. Now the last section is dyscalculia. Again, only do that if math is difficult, if there is a challenge around understanding math, and if you believe this could be part of dyslexia. If you scored highly in dyslexia, your math problems are probably quite easily solved, because solving dyslexia solutions, or they explain a lot of the math difficulties. Now, if dyslexia, and this is a reason for the dyscalculia, which means that difficulty to understand mathematical problems and master them. It's difficulty with concepts, like the first one is time. Time management is a challenge, and math has 4 pillars, and one of them is time. And the next question is poor memory for sequence of numbers or information. Of course, math is about sequences, about spaces in the sequence of numbers. Sequence is another one of the foundations. Difficulty dealing with money and understanding change. If you don't understand change, you can't understand money and how much change you will get when you give $20 and it costs $17.50. If a person can't tell you that, it is usually difficulty understanding change in general. Change as something becoming something else. Next question. Can do arithmetic, but not word problems in maths. That's now more of a dyslexic problem than a dyscalculia. They can do maths, but when you have to read a problem and comprehend it, it's an English issue, it's a literacy English, not a numeracy English, a numeracy problem. Next question, difficulty explaining or showing steps in maths on paper. It's almost like, yeah, it's there, it makes sense, I can work it out. I could not tell you how I got the answer right. And that often doesn't reflect well in marks, because teachers want to know how you got to something. Excellent long-term memory, but not always short-term. Yes, that's quite common. having trouble with working memory. Next problem is issue with concepts of math. Here are the 4 concepts that are the pillars, like change and consequence and sequence and time. They are really, they have to be mastered before math can be understood. And the last one is hard to learn times tables. We are expected, especially with the higher ones like 6, 7, and 8 times tables, to simply learn them by heart. This is not easy for a dyslexic mindset because it is an auditory and not a visual way of learning it. There are different ways you can learn times tables visually, and it's much easier and more fun. And this concludes your questionnaire. Look at the responses and do write to me. Tell me how you go. Tell me how you scored and ask any questions. I've put my email below, and any questions, please just ask or give me your score, and I can give you all the answers you haven't gotten from that questionnaire. Thank you.